I woke up this morning, saw a world full of trouble now. Thought, how did we ever get so far down? How's it ever gonna turn around? So I turned my eyes to heaven. I thought, God, why don't you do something? Just couldn't bear the thought of people living in poverty, children sold into slavery. The thought disgusted me, so I shook my fist at heaven and said, God, why don't you do something? He said, I did. I created you. If not us, then who? If not me and you, right now, it's time for us to do something. If not now, then when will we see an end to all this pain? It's not enough to do nothing. It's time for us to do something. If not us, then who? If not now, then when? Right now, it's time for us to do something. Now, these are haunting words, or maybe they're the words that you have been waiting for. Will we answer the call, or will we wait for somebody else to do it? Somebody that's more qualified, somebody more perfect. I have an announcement for you today. If we do this, we're waiting for the return of Jesus, because that person doesn't exist among us. And if we're going to sit here and wait, then we're going to have to settle for the case of the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. And I get it, because action can be difficult. But at some point in our lives, so are the constant excuses that we make. Sure, there's some days where we feel more equipped than others to live into this call of action. But I'm telling you, in the midst of highs and lows, wherever you find yourself today, God is calling us into action. He's calling us to do something. God is present in this, but the question I have is, are we willing to answer this call? I wonder, is God asking us to do something big? Maybe God's just asking us to simply be ourselves. Each one of us has gifts. Each one of us has a vision for ways to make a difference in the world. But again, it can be scary at times. Will we answer this call? Now imagine the impact that we can make in our lifetime if we simply just do the things that are present in front of us. The small things, they can begin to add up and have a domino effect on the world that we live in. The truth is, none of us are probably skilled enough, good enough, feel faithful enough, even me as your pastor. And yet, in the midst of wherever we are today, we have a God that calls us as we are to do something. Oftentimes, though, we choose to play it safe. But I'm telling you this morning, the safe card is not the one that we're called to play. So I sang this song by Matthew West this morning. It's an inspiring song and it's challenging, not just because of the falsetto, but because these steps are laid out perfectly in front of us. If not us, then who? If not now, then when? Sometimes we need a little bit of guidance for things that we can do in our lives. Here at the church, we have the good men, we have Laugh, Pray, Serve, we have the helping hands. We have ways to make a difference right here in our own community. Another thing that Deacon Julie mentioned earlier was God's work, our hands. We're getting together with all the different ELCA churches from the Moorhead area to make a difference this fall. We're going to be doing something tangible, something that we can hopefully see some immediate results. But yet I wonder, what if we don't always see those results? What if it's not always so immediate? We don't end up seeing the fruits of our labor. Does it diminish the risk that we've taken, the step of faith that we are living into? I don't think it does. But we live in a society where it's all about results. What have you done for me lately? What do I get out of taking this step in action? The truth is, if we don't benefit from something, we often take a step back and fill our schedule with something else. That's me looking in the mirror, friends, but maybe you are there as well. On the flip side, I wonder if we went into these things, these ways that we live out our faith, the ways that we make a difference in the world, without having any expectations at all. I wonder, what would that be like? If we didn't expect anything in return, accolades, comfort, even results. With this in mind, it becomes even more imperative in a world that God created and loves for us to make a difference, for us to take a step, to bring change to the world. You're you today because of somebody that invested in your life. It's not just because of who you are and what you've done, but it's the people that continue to walk around you, continue to pour into you, sometimes for good or bad. But we are called to do this, to pay it forward, to make a difference, to do something for others. This story of Stephen is an interesting one. Hopefully we never find ourselves in his sandals where we become martyrs for the faith. But yet, martyrdom aside, Stephen is a very faithful way for us to look at living out what God has blessed us with in the world. See, he was faithful even when it wasn't comfortable. And he discerned a way forward, a way that God was calling him to live and make a difference. And the truth is, he didn't be able to see everything come to fruition. He wasn't able to experience the work that he was doing and see the results that he had hoped for. But he knew that it was worth it. He took risks. He lived an urgent life. He followed God's commands. See, Stephen lived out his faith, trusting that God's call was truly that important. He risked his own safety. He stressed out his family. He probably burnt a bridge or two along the way. And he did so because he believed so strongly in the life-changing power of God that he risked it all to be a faithful follower. He did this because he felt that compelled. And so today we find ourselves as ingredient 4 in our Failing Forward series, remain faithful and do something. Now, because of Stephen's faith, we are told that he was able to make a great difference, even in the short time that we know about him in this story of Acts. See, in the chapter right before Acts 6, we learn that him and 6 of his friends were called and equipped to begin to make a difference, to point others toward Jesus Christ and the teaching of the day, which wasn't popular among all people. In fact, people started hurling insults at him and telling him that he was even blasphemous. And as a pastor, blasphemy is kind of actually a really big deal. Speaking profane or untrue things about God, it gets me a little riled up. And it's one thing for us to face disagreements or criticism, but outright lies, cries of blasphemy, these were huge claims for Stephen, and they would be for me as well. And whether you can relate or not as a layperson, I think we can all agree that we don't like it when people say things that are untrue about us. I'm somebody that clings to grace. I try to have it in my back pocket, but when somebody says something bad about me, and it's not just disagreeing, it's not just, disliking me, but when they're hurling something like blasphemy at Stephen, I get a little riled up. Grace isn't necessarily the card that I want to have in my back pocket. Maybe you're there as well. No matter what your circumstances are, the people that you find yourselves around, when people say things ill about you, you get a little riled up. And taking things a little bit further, it's not just words that are being hurled at Stephen. It's stones, it's rocks. It's him facing death for something that he believes so strongly in. And in the midst of seeing his life flash before his eyes, he says, "Lord, do not hold this sin against them." He was persecuted for living out his faith. The person that signed off on it is Saul. You might know that story because Saul became Paul. Paul was a great person of faith that made a difference, but at one point in his life, he was attacking Christians. The work that Stephen did led to this transformation for Saul into Paul. But the truth is, Stephen wasn't there to be able to experience it. Sometimes this is our story as well. The immediate impact isn't quite there. It doesn't happen when we want. But it doesn't mean that the work isn't important, that it doesn't have a big payoff in the end. Whether it's an immediate impact or if it's a both and, meeting some needs today and something far down the road that we can't even begin to imagine. I wonder, are we able to take steps like Stephen, not fearing failure, not feeling what the might be down the road could be, but living strongly into this trust that Jesus is with us, is calling us, is transforming us to save this world in great ways. When we ponder the immediate impact of faith, thinking only of the here and now, I think that we miss out on the greater story. And sure, experiencing something firsthand, being able to see something come to fruition, it's a great thing. I hope we can all experience that. But as I've preached here over the last 8 months, you probably have heard me mention a few times the importance of us being rooted in who we are. And that includes the past, it includes the present, and we pray for the future. This is how ministry has taken place here at Good Shepherd. And I've been inspired by many conversations with members here throughout the last 8 months. One of these people in particular is a charter member, somebody who's been here since the very beginning. His name is Earl Lee, and yes, he's early everywhere he goes. Earl talked about the story of a guy knocking at his door and saying, "Hey, I'd like to start another Lutheran church in town. Do you have interest in joining me?" And soon he found 25 other families that were going to join him as well 64 years ago, allowing him to live out faithfully the call that he felt for this particular area. Did everybody agree along this journey? Probably not. Does everybody agree with where Good Shepherd is at in their journey today? Yes. Probably not. But together we take steps in faith, trusting that the decisions we make are not just important for now, but they're important for the future as well. Our charter members' actions have made today possible. The urgency of Pastor Sorgen knocking on doors, living into this birth of another Lutheran church in Moorhead, this wasn't popular with everybody in town. And yet he knocked, he recruited, he equipped, and he sent people out to make a difference in the world. Not everybody is around today like Earl to see the fruits of this labor, but their faithfulness throughout the years is evident. Right now we're finding ourselves in the midst of a capital appeal to add an education wing here in our church. And this is exciting, this is scary. It's a call for us to be faithful, not just for us, but for others, and that can be a difficult thing. We know that this church exists for people that aren't just ourselves. It's for the people down the pew from us. It's for the person watching on Facebook Live or even the radio. And I can tell you what, I bet Pastor Sorgen never thought that we would be having worship on something called Facebook. And yet our churches continue to try to discern ways to make a difference in our community. We've continued to add to the next story. And together we are a part of the Good Shepherd story. As you're considering participation in this capital appeal, you might be a little bit scared. You might be a little bit uncertain. We might not see the fruit immediately. We might not be around long enough to really live into this reality. And yet we act because that is what God is calling us to do. God's inviting us on the journey. And we act like Stephen on faith, because passing on faith is that important. So in the midst of our joys and our anxieties in the present and the hopes and the uncertainties that we have for the future, may we be reminded of those that acted in faith that came before us, that allowed us to be able to worship here today. No matter what our worries are or anxieties, can we cast them on the Lord, trusting that God is with us in the journey. Amen.